Thank you so much for coming. I'm Jason Crow, and I'm so proud to be the representative for the 6th District of Colorado, of which we are in right now. As I promised at the beginning of this year, I was going to keep up a very robust schedule of town halls, gatherings, roundtables, telephone town halls. I've decided that in this moment, we just need to be communicating, talking. I need to be hearing from you as much as humanly possible. It's been a very rigorous DC schedule. We've been in Washington a lot, but whenever I'm back here, I'm doing these types of events very regularly so I can hear from you, you guys can hear from me, and we can continue the conversation. Because as I said at the beginning of my last large town hall, in-person town hall, these are not normal times. And I'm not going to pretend they're normal times. I'm not going to treat it as a normal time. This is an unprecedented, really, really tough time for our country and our community. And we're going to be very clear about that. I'm going to be clear-eyed about the challenge that we face. I'm also going to be very honest about what we can do and what we can't do and what the moment requires of all of us right now. Not just Michael and I up here on stage, but what we as a community need to be doing together. So with that, I want to recognize a couple of incredible community leaders without whom I cannot do the work that I do in Washington, who do so much for you locally. And I know I'm not going to get everybody here, so bear with me for a minute, but I do want to recognize State Rep Chad Clifford. Chad, will you stand up? Sheriff Tyler Brown, Sheriff Brown, Arapahoe County. Thank you, Tyler. Under Sheriff Jared Wellison. Thanks, Jared. Littleton Mayor Kyle Schlachter. Kyle, where are you? Thank you for hosting us, Kyle. Centennial City Council member Amy Thorpe. Amy. Centennial City Councilor Christine Sweetland. Christine, I see you there. Good to see you. Arapahoe County Clerk Joan Lopez. CD6 Region Alana Spiegel. Alana. Littleton Public Schools Joan Anderson. Joan, thank you. Former City Council Candace Moon. Candace. Thank you. And the City Councilor Andrea Peters. Andrea. Did I miss anybody? I'm sure I did. All right. Well, thank you all for joining. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to turn it over to Senator Bennet to talk about how we're going to go about answering the questions. So make sure we make it random and we spread it out in the crowd. But I'm just very honored to be here with Michael. Since I first came into Congress, he was already there and took me under his wing and really taught me the ropes about legislating, policy work. I am a unabashed policy wonk. I love policy. I love to take the deep dive, and there's nobody who does that better than Michael Bennet, who always shames me when we're on the weekly commuter flight every Monday morning to Washington, because I'm sitting here watching Netflix, and he has like a 600-page book on some policy issue. And I'm like, Michael, why do you make me look so bad all the time? But truly an honor to have Michael Bennet, who always helps Colorado punch way above its weight. Michael, over to you.
Can you hear me now? You can. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And I am deeply honored to be here with Jason. I've taken a page out of Jason Crow's book. He talked about the town halls that he's been doing, and he's been relentless about it. Actually, there is no senator in the United States Senate who has had more town halls than I have in this period. Because for the same reason that Jason is talking about, I think I was in Pueblo on Saturday. We had a great town hall down there. Now we have this one at Centennial. Tomorrow, actually, we're having a different one at DU, kind of a sort of a anti-Citizens United town hall that I'm having with my old friend. Yeah. My old friend John Tester, who used to be the senator from Montana, and who we lost in this last cycle, tragically. But I want to, first of all, thank Jason for his extraordinary leadership, and I know you all know that. He's an incredible member of Congress, and some of you may be thinking, well, the bar isn't very high back there, and that's actually true. But if we had a bunch of people more like Jason, who understood that his job really has nothing to do with him, but it's about serving the people of this district, serving the people of Colorado, serving the country, something that I know he learned in his service in our military overseas, lessons that have carried with him throughout his political career and into this auditorium tonight. You know, we'd have, I think it's safe to say, the House of Representatives would have a 90% approval rating instead of the 9% approval rating that they have right now. And it's been a great privilege for me to have the chance to work with him. And I want to thank all of you for being here as well. I mean, this is an extraordinary time in our country's history. It's a profoundly reactionary period in American history. And I have no doubt that if we do what we are required to do, when we consider what our responsibilities are to this democracy, that we will not just get through this, but that there will be something on the other side of this that is very important to the future of the kids, for example, who are graduating this weekend, or did graduate this weekend from Arapahoe High School. That is who is in my mind when I am on the floor of the Senate. I see the superintendent? No, Board of Education member here. That is who is in my mind as somebody who once was superintendent of Denver Public Schools, who worked in a school district where most of the kids were kids of color, most of the kids were kids living in poverty, whose parents were working 2 and 3 jobs. The question for me in the end of all of this nightmare that we're in today is, how do we build a better future for them? How do we build a better future for the kids who graduate from Arapahoe? How do we build a better future for the kids that are graduating all over rural Colorado as we're standing here today? We got to keep that question in our sights. We are going to have a very scientific approach. We have that Easter Bunny head over there, and that has traveled with me to all of my town halls. I'm grateful that Jason's idea, by the way. That it's true. He's not lying. But we don't screen questions in these town halls. That's also an unusual part of my town halls. I want you to feel like you're able to ask what you're able to ask, or that, more important, we're answering what you really ask. We're going to call 2 tickets, 2 numbers at a time, and then we'll have microphones come to you, and then you'll ask your question, and we'll try to do the best we can to answer it. We're going to end on time because you guys have responsibilities. Jason has responsibilities, and I have the honor of introducing my friend Cory Booker at something in Denver today that I need to get to the film. John, take it away.
Awesome. I'm going to read the first 2, and when I do that, if you could just raise your hand, that would be great. First number is going to be, the last 4 is going to be 7976, 7976, and 7850. 7850.
Raise your hands.
We have a winner.
I have tons of questions, but I'll limit it to one. And my biggest fear is, how are you going to stop his big, beautiful, ugly bill?
Well, I mean, it is a terrible bill. This is actually, I was looking back over my 6 years of Congress, which feels like a lot longer than that, actually. And I was thinking about all the things I voted on, some of which I'm extremely proud of, things like the Safer Community Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, great things. And then I was thinking about the other things that I voted against. And I can say that this bill is actually the worst bill that I have ever seen, an omnibus global bill, in my entire time in Congress. And let me tell you why, just by the numbers, and then I'm going to tell you about my perspective on stopping it. It's going to add $3.2 trillion to the deficit. It's not paid for. It's going to have over $1 trillion in cuts of Medicaid, right? So you're not just cutting Medicaid for 13 million Americans, including 175,000 people in my district that I represent, but you're taking $1 trillion out of the healthcare system. Just think about what's going to happen. The hospitals, the clinics, the medical providers, whether you're on Medicaid or not, think about what that's going to do to the entire healthcare system of America, taking $1.1 trillion out of that system. It's going to cut $300 billion in SNAP cuts, right? So this is hungry children in our community, kids that go to school here, at this school and other schools. And get this, to give tax cuts largely for the top 1%. So it's going to give one for 1.2 million Americans. It's going to give more tax cuts to the top 1.2 million than to the bottom 127 million. Right? And if you're in the bottom 20%, you're going to see an average of a $90 tax cut before offsets for Medicaid and SNAP losses, which are going to put people deep in a hole. So this is an awful bill, and it's going to have terrible consequences. All Democrats in the House united against this bill and voted against it. And that's actually happened several times this cycle, where we have united against a bill, which is fairly uncommon, actually. So this is a point of pride for us. I'm going to continue to fight. I'm going to continue to communicate, because one of our biggest responsibilities right now is to communicate to as many people as possible, including people in areas that are represented by folks who are not doing town halls, people who are hiding from their constituents because they've supported this. And we have an obligation to reach out to those folks and to put pressure on those folks who are trying to hide from their responsibility. So that's my primary responsibility. And if it comes back to the House, of course, I will resist it again. So now over to the Senate.
Thank you. So the functional Senate that Jason's talking about, where did you go? Where's the person? Sorry. Thanks for the question. It's on the minds of lots and lots of people. First of all, I'm not going to repeat anything Jason said. I'll agree with everything that he said. Where are we living as a country on these economic questions? That's really important to understand, because Trump is the cause of many, many problems. I blame him for many, many things. But I think fundamentally he's also a symptom of a very important problem in America, which is the lack of economic mobility that we have in this country, the profound income inequality we have in this country. I could give you a bunch of statistics, but let me just give you just one. Today, as we're here, the top 1% of Americans own 50% of the value of the stock market. The bottom 50% of Americans own 1% of the value of the stock market. That's not how it looked 20 years ago. And for the American people, there's a real feeling that no matter how hard they work, their kids aren't going to do better than they are, and there's a lot of evidence that that's the case. 50% of 30-year-olds today are going to make less income than their parents, and if you're a young man in your 20s in America today, you're making less on average than you did in the 1970s. What is Donald Trump's answer to that? To give big tax breaks to the richest people and to cut the most significant safety net we have in America. I was in Grand Junction recently with a Republican congressman that serves in Colorado, and we were with all of the healthcare providers from all over the western slope of Colorado. These are red areas of Colorado where Medicaid it truly is, keeping the lights on in the hospitals there, truly keeping the lights on in the clinics there. And the people there were saying, we already don't have OB services, for example. We already have to send people to Denver because we've had to close, not emergency rooms, but primary care or mental care. There's mental health care. There's all kinds of stuff. That's before Trump does the cuts to Medicaid. So we're going to do everything we can to fight this in the Senate. And there are disagreements among the Republicans right now about what they want to do. I think ultimately Donald Trump could care less about whether or not he preserves Medicaid. I think he's going to actually try to cut Medicaid, and I think it is very likely that he will be able to ram it through. Jason said he wanted to be honest. I want to be honest. There are 53 votes probably. But we have to fight and try and see if we can shame them into not doing it. There are a whole bunch of really important climate provisions that are being reversed, that are really important to Colorado, that are really important to rural Colorado, our wind and solar industries that matter to Republican senators, or at least used to before Donald Trump made them all walk out on the very first day they were there and vote for Pete Hegseth to be the Secretary of Defense. I mean, he did that for a reason, and the reason was to show everybody in America who's the boss, who's in charge, what he can actually get them to do. But I think that the debate that we're going to have is really important in and of itself, because it will demonstrate to the American people that Trump is actually making matters worse, you know, now that he's there. Not a big surprise, but that is what he's doing. And then the last point I want to make is this. We're in a fight to save Medicaid when what we need to be in is a fight to have universal health care in this country. And universal mental health care in this country, and we can't lose sight of that.
I think we're going to go with our next two. Our next two are 7963. That's 7963 and 7864. 7864. If you hear your number called, if you could just raise your hand until somebody sees you.
Hi. Number one, I just want to say that I personally worked really hard on this last election, and I feel that we were kind of betrayed by not the Democrats not being honest with our original choice of Biden. The other thing I want to ask of you is we lost, and instead of completely criticizing everything that the Republicans have done, have the Democrats learned anything? Is there anything that the Democrats are going to change? Because we all know in this room we just can't go in the direction we're going right now. It's absolutely critical to democracy. That's all.
Could I, if you want to take that?
Yeah, so I will answer this as a representative. This is an official event, so I can't go into campaigns, and I won't talk about campaigns. But I can tell you that there are two people on this stage right now that actually led the charge to address that issue when we saw warning signs last year, that spoke out and tried to say things were not moving in the right direction, and tried to right the ship. Because my obligation is to all of you. It's to the Constitution. It's to the country. It's not to any one person, any one elected official. And I take that obligation extremely seriously, and I always will. So that's one. Two is, I'll just speak to policy, right? Not the politics, and I'm not going to talk campaigns, but policy-wise, there are areas where we have to do better. There just are, right? And we can't. You know, I grew up in a working class family. I started working construction to help pay my way through college. I've been employed since I was 15, worked fast food. And what I can tell you is, if we want to be the party of the working class, which is why I'm a Democrat, right? Because I don't want government to solve my problems for me. I don't want the answers to be given to me. What I want is a fair shake. I want a level playing field, and the ability to work hard and to achieve something, and I don't want the game to be rigged. That's why I'm a Democrat. I just want things to be fair. It's that simple for me. And in so many places around the country, places where I grew up, that is not the case. The American dream is out of reach. The American dream, the ability to buy a home, to send your kids to college, for your kids and grandkids' life to be better than your own, is actually dead for so many Americans. Right? And that anger and that desperation is real, and we have to pay attention to it. And in so many places around the country, where in large cities in particular, working Americans are being forced out because they can't afford to live. You can't afford to buy a home. You can't afford transportation. And we have to be honest that we haven't done enough in a lot of ways. We haven't leaned in hard enough on affordable housing, on real mass transit and transportation costs, on really breaking through on the issue of equitable education, right? And we have to break through on universal health care, of which Michael's been a leader, right? We have to lean in and do more and be more aggressive about it, absolutely. And that is a lesson that we all should take to heart. And I'm always somebody that says, you know, you're not always going to agree with me. There are, I'm sure, issues that, you know, most of you disagree with me on one thing, on something that comes up. But you're going to know where I stand. I'm going to be honest with you and answer questions, and I'm going to keep an open mind, and I'm going to try to lead together. Right? This idea of servant leadership, of which I talk so much about, is this notion that there is no one woman or man or leader that has all the answers. Right? That's what Donald Trump tries to get people to think. Right? That's just not going to work anymore. It's 2025. The challenges we face as a country and community are too complicated, too deep-rooted for any one person to have all the answers and to know all of it. That's why we have to collaboratively address it and go on that journey together. Right? That is the solution, and that's where I think I am, and the people that have ascribed to my leadership philosophy, whether they be Democrats or Republicans, are also at.
I want to, are you, I'm trying to find, thank you. Thank you for that question, by the way. And in all the town halls that I've done so far, nobody has asked the question that you just did. And I want to thank Jason for his leadership, which was extraordinary in that moment and somewhat rare, unique, really. And I want to paint a little bit of a picture of where I was, too. I spent 3 days before the debate on the eastern plains of Colorado, in the deepest red parts of Colorado, having conversations, among other things, about the Farm Bill, the effect of social media on the mental health of kids in communities all over the state. These are places where no matter what I do, I'll never get 20 or 30%, more than 20 or 30% of the vote because of the partisan nature of our political system, but where I think it's important to be, just like it's important to be right here. And I was there not to talk about politics, but to listen. And I was listening to the concerns that they have about how hard it is to find young people, for example, to do the jobs that Jason was talking about when he was growing up. Then I came home, and I was on the phone. Susan and I were sitting in our living room, and I was on the phone. She and I were on the phone with our 3 daughters, who shockingly are now 25, 24, and 20 years old. And they were watching the debate with us, but they were watching it, from home. And they're like, "Dad, this is crazy." And then I spent 3 days on the western slope of Colorado in much more blue territory than but people were saying, "Michael, you have to go back and say something." Because I saw this in my mom, I saw this in my dad. And the following Tuesday, I was sitting in the Democratic caucus in the Senate, and when it came time for me to talk, I said, if we don't change the top of the ticket, the Democrats are going to lose in a landslide in this election. And the consequence of that is that we will be if we lose this election to President Trump, we will be the first generation in American history to leave less opportunity, not more, to the people coming after it. And there's a lot of talk these days about threats to our democracy. That is the fundamental threat to our democracy. That lack of economic opportunity that Jason is talking about and is so focused on. And it's that we need to address. And You know, to be honest, this isn't political either, but let me just say, it's not Trump's fault that he won the election. You know, and your question about, you know, how the Democratic Party lost twice to somebody who took away, for example, the first civil right that we've lost since Reconstruction, a woman's right to choose. Like, how is it? I would have thought that that would have disqualified him out of 330 million Americans, because nobody else has done that. And yet we weren't able to win because I think we were not able to create a convincing focus on our desire to strengthen the middle class in this country, to re-energize our middle class, and to make sure people have real opportunity. Jason talked about our education system. What was our proposal on that? Free college? You know, in Colorado, people are a lot more interested in knowing that when their kids graduate from high school, they can earn a living wage, not the minimum wage. That they have the ability to be able to do what Jason did, graduating from high school. And we don't do that. We can't do that as a state or a country. We can't do what any other industrialized country can do with the kids that are graduating from high school. There isn't a country in the industrialized world where people are fighting to have mental health care for their kids, except for the United States of America. The good news is that the list is not, you know, there is a long list of stuff that we could be fighting for that would, I think, put the American people in a position of picking something other than chaos, which is what we have picked, because people understandably are so angry about an economy that's not supporting themselves and their families. I didn't vote for Trump. I thought he'd be a terrible president. He's been far worse than I ever thought he would be. He really has. I mean, I had the lowest expectations you could possibly have, and he has exceeded them, if you can do that. He has. He has. But if we don't get our act together, it's not about Trump. It's about how do we drive a stake through Trumpism. That's what we need to do as a nation, and we can.
I think you gave me a little bit of a segue there in terms of stake in Trumpism. But one of the things that's difficult just as a citizen is to keep track of the plethora of events. You open the newspaper and there's something else. You go, oh my goodness, I never thought that would happen. And that whether it's an economic policy, whether it's a medical policy, whether it's how we're treating immigrants in our country, it is just over and over again every day. And so I'm interested in your advice in terms of the ways that interested, active citizens can be helpful in supporting driving that stake in a way that is meaningful right now while he's in power.
I will keep letting you go first, or I'll go first. Whatever you want to do.
We're going to work out. I'll just answer the question. I'm just answering the question.
I also don't want him thinking that I'm avoiding the hard questions either.
Somewhere in there is a how many elected officials that screw in a light bulb joke.
Or
But,
do
all right. Yeah, it does seem unrelenting. First of all, I'm not surprised by anything they're doing, because it's what they said they were going to do. It's in Project 2025. It's literally written down. I am astonished by the pace of it. The sheer speed of which it's happening has been shocking to me. So we don't have the luxury, though, to take passes. We just don't have the luxury to say, I'm not going to do this one, I'm not going to do this one, I'm going to focus. We have to fight on every front. And we have to put speed bumps, as many as we can, to slow these things down. Right? We just have to. And we are working so hard. And so are many of you and many of the people that I called out at the beginning to try to fight back and to protect our community. But this also will not be solved in Washington. You know, this fix that we're in is not going to be solved by me or Michael or any of the other elected officials. We have a critical role to play, a very important role to play, and really important jobs in fighting back. And not just fighting back, but also building something new, have an alternative vision an idea for people to choose. But ultimately, this is going to be solved by all of us. Right? Washington, in the history of America, Washington has never driven change. It hasn't. It's set policy, it's responded to things, it's helped change the trajectory, but real change has always come from the country. Right? And if we're going to turn around the polarization, the partisanship, the entrenched vitriol that we see growing, the extremism, it's going to have to be by reinvigorating civic life in America. This is where I'm going to walk out for a minute. Alexis de Tocqueville wrote in Democracy in America, he compared different democracies. And he said, but in America, it's different. And I'm paraphrasing here. He said, what is unique about America that doesn't exist anyplace else is the civic life. That politics in rallying around democracy doesn't revolve around electoral politics or Washington. It actually exists throughout the country in this fabric of community and civic organizations. That's how Americans organize themselves. And for so many years, that's how we did it. So it's now no surprise that as civic life has frayed, organization involvement has frayed, and we've self-segregated, that our politics have followed. Right? So my request for all of you is to engage in citizen oversight, because you all need to be our eyes and ears. We need to know what's happening in our community. When we're out in Washington, our teams are out in a lot of places, but we're not everywhere. And we need your eyes and ears to help us see what's happening and how to respond to it. That's one. Number two is, if you're not already, run out tonight and join an organization. A Rotary, a parent-teacher association, a local community board. Get involved and get to know people who you wouldn't otherwise have interaction with, and engage and let them know who we are as a community, what our values are. Like that, ultimately, is how we're going to solve it.
Let me just, I'm so happy this guy is your congressman. First of all, what they're doing is totally intentional, what he said. They're flooding the zone and flooding the zone and flooding the zone, which is what he did before he got elected and what he did the last time that he was elected. It's different this time because the last time he didn't think he was going to win. Like he was standing there in New York and, what? Hillary Clinton's not the next president? This time they had 4 years to prepare, and they did prepare. And that's what you're seeing, and that's what we're dealing with, and it is an avalanche every single day. And that's a reality that we're all going to have to find a way to deal with. I will say that I would suspect that all of us would be a little better off if we maybe turned the cable television off for an hour or two a day, rather than watching it, if we're watching it all day or for hours and hours and hours. And I'm telling you, we would be better off, not doom scrolling on our phones all day long. We would. Listen, and by the way, if you think I don't understand what that looks like, know that my mother, Susie Bennet, who was born in 1938 in Warsaw, Poland, and the year before Hitler invaded, is still alive, and it spends most of every day, as far as I can tell, sending me that article, this article. Did you see what they said on MSNBC? It's like, I got it. And then I come to these meetings and we get it again. And Susie Bennet, you should stop watching all that stuff. But the other thing that happens, because this is the nature of doom scrolling and the nature of those programs, is that in some ways they're selling advertising and everything else by it can create a sense of fatalism and a sense of hopelessness. And I know there's some people who say, you're naive, don't you know how terrible this is? As I said, I stipulate to that. This is terrible. This is a terrible reactionary period in our history. But we have no right to be fatalistic. We have absolutely no right to tell our children that there is no hope. That would be such an abomination of our responsibility, or a compromise of our responsibility as citizens in a country where, just to take one example of a billion, of John Lewis's willingness to subject his skull to the billy clubs on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, not for his sake, but for the sake of democracy. I can assure you that there is no one in this room, I don't even know you, that has more of a reason to think this country is corrupt than, or that its government is corrupt than John Lewis did. But that didn't keep him from giving up hope. In fact, he saw it as part of what he had to do to make sure that his generation and the next generation were able to sustain that. And frankly, it's the only way we've ever made any progress in this country. And that is something we have to do. And I agree totally with Jason that in Colorado, our civic infrastructure has atrophied seriously. I think a big part of that is these phones and these social media platforms that those guys that were sitting behind President Trump at his inauguration have inflicted on school children all over our country and inflicted on the rest of us. I think that the collapse of edited content journalism in America is something that we are wrestling with in a very profound way. Do you think, just one example, do you really think we'd be having a conversation about whether Canada was going to be our 51st state if Walter Cronkite were reading us the news at night, every night? I don't think we would. I don't think we would. And we're not going to bring that analog world back, but Trump has mastered that digital world. And we have to find a way to rebuild the architecture that Jason was talking about. There's no other way to do it. And I would add to his list, I guarantee you that there is a kid in this community who could really use somebody who came once a week to read to them. I guarantee you there is a senior in a elder care facility who could use somebody to come there and read to them. My worst nightmare, by the way, as a former Democratic politician, is that someday I'm going to find myself in one of those facilities and somebody's going to say to someone else, yeah, I don't really know, but he used to be a politician, so put on the cable. You know, and I'm going to be sitting here watching that 24 hours a day because I can't think of anything less constructive in terms of the answer to your question. And post-COVID, we have lost our ability to interact in the way that Jason was talking about. And we have to rebuild that at the local level and in the state of Colorado. That's what I think. Thank you for your question.
We're going to have our next two questions. The first one is going to be 7948. 7948. The second one is going to be 7871. 7871.
See how fast I can.
Sure.
Oops.
Thank you for,
Who's wearing this better, by the way?
We didn't plan that.
I know the answer.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to thank you both for giving all of us an opportunity to hear your perspective on what's going on. The issue, well, I think I share a lot of issues with people here, but one that is extraordinarily dear to my heart is the existence of national service and AmeriCorps and Senior Corps, which are programs that engage hundreds of thousands of seniors, young people, people of all ages in service, principally to nonprofits, but also to government entities, to schools, They help prepare our forests so that they don't burn up. I mean, just critical work. And importantly, also, it gives them an attachment to this nation because it is national service. And it works in concert with all of the local efforts. And so what I'd like, I mean, I know that both of you support national service, AmeriCorps specifically, but I'm hoping that you can tell me that you're crossing the aisle and talking to your colleagues that wear different hats than we do, trying to convince them of the importance of national service.
Do you want? We'll give brief answers, I think, because we both strongly support it. There are cuts in this bill to national service. You're right. Typically, it's been bipartisan, and hopefully, someday we're going to be able to put those back in. In the meantime, we've got to figure out how to keep engaging young people in the kind of service that we were all just having conversations about. There are probably things the state of Colorado can do there. There are probably things our private sector can do. I think it's critically important to who we are as a nation. That to Tocqueville observation that Jason was talking about our civic architecture has so much to do with the volunteer spirit of the American people, and it is a way of bringing us together. I mean, we should be not dealing with the cuts. We should actually be creating a system in this country of national service. That would be a way of building our civic spirit, and I hope someday we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, well, one of the many parade of horribles from this administration was the slashing of AmeriCorps. And we actually have a very large AmeriCorps facility here in this district, AmeriCorps Vista. And the kids from there all around the country who had signed on to serve our community and their country, AmeriCorps, were literally given 24 hours to pack their bags and go home. That was a month ago. We got frantic calls of like, what do we do? Right, these kids just have to leave, right, who signed on to literally do projects in our community. It's just horrible stuff. But my life, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for national service. It completely changed my life, actually, and it's still the lens through which I view my work. I actually enlisted in the National Guard originally just to help pay for college, because I didn't have money for school. So I did it for economic reasons, and little did I know that I was going to completely change my life and that my trajectory, and instill in me pride in service and lead me here today. And I still view this country through the lens of those paratroopers that I led when I was in the Army. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, straight, gay, rich, poor, from the north, from the south, east, west, and everywhere in between. Right? We never had any reason to find ourselves together. We never would have found ourselves together had it not been for that experience. But there we were. We had to work together. We had to come together to survive, literally, and we did. Right? And that's why when I think about people that voted a way that I would have disagreed with, I sometimes take a pause and I think about, is this one of those men who I saw run into enemy fire to save a 6-year-old Iraqi boy who he doesn't know? Is this one of these men who struggled with that experience and yet showed a humanity that you would never expect from an 18-year-old put into an inhumane situation? What is behind that, right? And that's what national service does to you, whether it's the Civilian Conservation Corps, whether it's AmeriCorps, whether it's Peace Corps. It takes you out of your comfort zone, and it binds us together in ways that you really couldn't in any other way. And that's why, as a member of the Bipartisan Veterans Caucus in the House, we have made it our priority to reinvigorate national service pipelines. And we are working in a bipartisan way to do that. And there are Republican friends of mine who are committed to that project still, who are working with me to do it.
So I'd like to thank you as well for coming out and keeping up this pace. I think it's very important to be in front of your constituents, unlike many folks out there. We were talking earlier about just the pace of just all the stuff that's happening, and it's hard to keep up with it. One thing that, let's just focus on one thing, and that's the corruption that I'm seeing. If you look at, take one aspect of corruption, which is cryptocurrency, it seems like the laws, cryptocurrency, it seems like the laws are inadequate today to meet the threat from corruption in cryptocurrency. And my question is there any focus in either the House or the Senate to shore up these laws and try to get ahead of the game here?
So we have have you had a bill go through yet in the House?
On emoluments or no, not crypto, no.
So, yeah, we're not keeping up with it. There is a bill in the Senate that I think is really a terrible bill. It doesn't, it does nothing to prevent President Trump or his family or members of Congress, for that matter, from issuing cryptocurrency. You hear of a case where the guy's making billions and billions of dollars with these shady schemes, and that's not even dealt with in this legislation. There are allegedly the votes to pass it. The thing's called the Genius Act, by the way, in the Senate. So naturally, I offered an amendment which I called the Stable Genius Act, and that simply says that if you are the president and you are the vice president and you are a member of Congress, you should not be able to issue cryptocurrency. You should not be able to speculate in it, and you should put it in a blind trust. So I'm hoping very much to be able, if they bring it forward next week, I don't know whether they will, I'm looking forward to that debate, because I think that the problem is the bill is not thoughtful enough, and it risks the result of sending a signal to the American people that this is okay, that it's copacetic, that somehow the consumer protections part of this law are all right if it passes. And that I'm deeply concerned about that, because I've been watching this thing, and it has gone through as a tear through the Senate, and I think it's a very, very incomplete job, to say the least. So look for the Stable Genius Amendment.
And then the corruption is absolutely stunning in every respect, whether it's, foreign government giving a $400 million jet to Donald Trump for his personal use in a way that he can use it after he's president, whether it's, the Bitcoins or meme coins, whether it's this new club that Donald Trump Jr. opened up in Washington called the Executive Branch. It's literally the name of the club. And people can pay $500,000 for a membership, and they're guaranteed the ability to rub elbows with cabinet officials and senior members of the administration. Gratuitous pay to play, right? And I can go on. There's dozens of these examples. So our first responsibility is to not let it become normal. This is a big risk, that we become numb to it and that somehow this is normalized in our politics. No, we got to call it out. We got to shame people for it. We got to not stop calling it out. Right? We cannot allow this to be normal, because it's not. Number two, many of these things are violations of the emoluments clause of the Constitution. Absolutely, just straight up, right? So what I say, and what I've heard Michael say repeatedly is, the truth will come out. There will be investigations. There will be oversight. We're already doing as much oversight as we can. In the House, it's harder because we're in the minority. We don't have the gavels yet. But there will be accountability sooner rather than later. And I am not going to forget. As I think the path to reconciliation and the path to moving forward includes accountability. It includes getting to the truth. So I am not going to let any of this stuff pass. That's number two. And then the last piece is, again, all of you speaking up and letting people know locally with your networks that you're paying attention too. and this is unacceptable for all of you. So while we're legislating and we're trying to pursue these large reform packages, actually Adam Schiff and I joined forces years ago before he abandoned me for the Senate. After the first impeachment trial, of which, probably one of Michael's harder times in the Senate was being locked in the Senate chamber and listening to me for 2 weeks straight. After that trial, we worked to put together a comprehensive democracy reform package. And the point of the Protecting Democracy Act is to actually learn lessons from this era and say, you know what, it turns out that many of the things that we have taken for granted, our norms, our customs, our traditions of our democracy are just that. They're not actually in law. They're not enforceable. And when people stop abiding by them, there's no recourse. So we have a comprehensive package that when we get the opportunity, I think we need to prioritize, and I've been pushing leadership to prioritize this, to pass it if we're back in power, which I think we will be at some point in the near future, and learn the lessons and establish the guardrails that we have learned are actually missing.
So we have time for one more question.
Is that really true or not?
If we can be brief, we could do two.
Okay, let's do 2, 3.
Okay.
Can we do 3? 3 quick ones.
The next two are going to be 7938,
Okay.
7938, 7946, 7946. And then if we wanted to do a third question,
Folks.
are going to be 7946 and 7938.
Yes, ma'am. It's coming. It's coming down.
You know, we were actually talking, the two of us here, and I think one of the questions that we have, and you've touched on it, but we obviously missed the mark in our messaging in '24. And I think as Democrats, we are craving direction with a solid, clearly defined, simple, and understandable message that we can communicate to those we've lost on who we are, what we believe, and where we're going. What's happening in Washington?
I mean, I don't think it's just a messaging problem. I think that we have a profound a disconnection. It's less a messaging problem than it is a substantive problem. And the substantive problem is that we don't have a persuasive set of arguments about what we would stand for to create an economy that when it grew for everybody, not just the people at the very top. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. You know, both parties have pursued a trade policy that has clearly benefited the people at the very top and hasn't really necessarily benefited lots of other people. And And as much as Trump drives me crazy on all these subjects, he had a preternatural sense about the China question here that we have not had a position on that's compelling. Our education position, was about addressing student debt, college debt, when 60% of the American people don't have a college degree, but are desperate for knowing that we could develop an education system in this country that's driving academic achievement for kids that are graduating from high school. That's something that we could stand for. What was our health care position? It was extending the tax credits for the Affordable Care Act. Well, that's an important thing to do, but is that really compelling when we're living in a place where people are struggling to keep their head above water just to pay for insurance in this country so they can, support their kids? I had somebody, I've got a young man in this front row, asked me the other day, who just graduated from Western in Gunnison, and she said to me, I'm going to be off my parents' insurance in a year. Am I supposed to get, 2 or 3 jobs to pay for the health insurance that I have? That is a great frickin' question. Why are we defending a system that is ridiculously expensive and provides the scarcest health care that we can imagine? Why are we defending an education system that can't be defended? We have never fulfilled, there's a lot of discussion these days about Trump's, inability to listen to, what courts say to Trump, his desire not to do that. We still haven't fulfilled what Brown versus Board of Education says we should be doing when it comes to public education in this country. So there is a lot for us to stand for, and partly because I think we made a poor judgment in Joe Biden accomplished some really important things. The most important thing he accomplished, in my view, was beating Donald Trump to begin with. That was really important. And he was the right guy to run at that moment, and we did some important work on infrastructure, on the Affordable Care, on the Inflation Reduction Act and that other stuff. But the best decision he could have made for himself and for the country would have been to say, you know what, I am done, and I'm going to create a bridge to the next generation. We're going to let a new group of leadership emerge. That's what he should have done. And we better take this opportunity to figure out what it is we want to go out and fight for, because otherwise we're going to lose another election to Trump and another election. I don't mean to Donald Trump, but to Trumpism. And we will have failed to live up to the obligation that we have to the next generation and the generation after that. And that's what we have to do. And it's going to be, you know what, we're not going to fix that problem today. We've got to work on it and work on it and work on it, and I'm absolutely convinced we will succeed, and we'll be able to turn the page on all this.
So for me, it's about fairness. I spoke earlier about why I'm a Democrat. Raised in a Republican family, in a Republican community, by the way. But because I want a level playing field. I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm not afraid of competition. I welcome it. But I want a level playing field, and I want everyone playing by the same rules. Because that's when America is at its best. That's when Americans are at their best. Number 2, making democracy truly work so it can deliver. And that includes government reform. That includes addressing the systematic barriers to democracy. And for me, that's ending gerrymandering. And campaign finance reform. I'm often asked, what is the one thing? I think to do this job right, there has to be one thing that you are instantly willing to lose this job over. I think that should be a litmus test for anyone in service. What's the one thing? And there's actually a couple for me. That if I knew that if I voted for or did, I would just lose the job. And absolutely, or my magic wand thing, that's the other way to put it, it would be gerrymandering. You end gerrymandering in America, and overnight it changes who's in Congress. Right? And you end up with a very different result. So it's making democracy work. And then the third is investing in people instead of investing in wealth. I mean, it's simple, right? The philosophies are simple. What we believe in is that when historically, we invest in people, education, infrastructure, job training. Now look at the GI Bill. The GI Bill changed America, right? When you invest in people, it works. And it gives you a return on that investment many times over. When you invest in wealth, in the form of tax cuts for the top, it actually has never worked. Trickle-down economics has actually never worked, right? So that's my message. That's why I'm here, and that's what I'm going to fight for.
Yeah, there is a lot going on. Yeah, Palestine is big. What is being done to stop the genocide? Are we still giving our tax dollars for the missiles and things, or is there some things that are being slowed down there some way?
When I came into Congress, I actually formed the Protection of Civilians in Conflict Caucus because of my own experience in seeing civilian casualties in war and in conflict. And I've led on that along with Andy Kim, who's also now in the Senate, and Sarah Jacobs from San Diego. And we have led efforts to try to prevent civilian casualties. This war, this conflict, requires, first of all, the 40+ thousand civilian casualties is just completely unacceptable by any measure. It just should not be happening. This conflict requires that we hold many things to be true, which is not easy in our current politics, in our current environment. And what can be true is that the Palestinian people have the right to self-determination and statehood and to live in peace and dignity. What is also true is Israel has the right to exist as the Jewish homeland and to also live in peace and security and dignity. The path for that, as out of reach as it may seem right now, is for a two-state solution, of which I have fought for a very, very long time. I've traveled there. I've spoken with Palestinians. I've spoken with Israelis. I've gone to the West Bank. I have taken a deep dive on this issue, and we cannot give up hope on that, because ultimately that is the way to true peace. So that is also true. Another component of that is it's not just enough to say that you're going to protect yourself, but you also have to do it in the right way, right? And I did this. I had experience doing this in war, where you have a mission and you're trying to defend or accomplish your mission, and you do have to focus on those civilians, right? Because there is a right way and a wrong way to do it, and I have been very vocal in offering my critiques, my suggestions, my pressure to make sure that we are doing everything possible to protect civilians in this conflict. And I will not stop being vocal about that, because not just our credibility, but the moral aspects of this are at play as well.
I agree with everything that Jason just said, and I would say, you know, one of the things that he said that I believe is very, very important is that we cannot let go of the two-state solution as the answer to the situation that we're facing there. And people are giving up on that. There are people in the region who have given up on that, and there are people in our political system here on both sides who have given up on that. And I think that's a huge mistake, because it really is the only way out of the permanent state of war that people are in right now. And it has been an epic human tragedy, what has happened. And it has been absolutely appalling to see the lack of care that Benjamin Netanyahu has had for the Palestinians who have suffered in this conflict. And I think it is an abomination that he has done nothing to make it easier to get humanitarian aid in to Gaza as well. We need this war to come to an end. We need there to be a peace in this region, and then we have to figure out how to build that two-state solution. And it is an example where the United States has a critical role to play here as the leading democracy in the world. It's hard for us to play that role when we have a president who doesn't think that's important and doesn't care about the democracy, and every day is figuring out how to undermine it. That jeopardizes our credibility around the world as well in ways that are very, very fundamental. And when he's flying over there to, take in one airplane, the biggest piece of graft that all the presidents together in our country's history have not ever taken, it creates huge problems as well in the region. So I'm grateful that we have Jason's experience on the battlefield as he thinks about these questions, and I lean on him a lot to understand the issue.
In the food aid, can I add? I'm just going to add one other thing. I was with Cindy McCain recently, and she's the head of the World Food Program right now. And she told me unequivocally that there has been no food that has been allowed to enter Gaza since March 2nd. It is, I mean, it is unacceptable by any measure, and I'm putting pressure any and every way that I know how to say it's unacceptable. The Trump administration is not listening to me, to us. I've communicated that to everybody who will listen, anybody who will listen, because it just cannot be allowed. It cannot stand by any stretch. And you have my promise that I am exerting as much pressure as possible to stop that state of affairs and to get food and medicine flowing again.
Jason, you me, this is it. We're done.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Senator Bennet, for joining a wonderful Arapahoe High School. And I'm gonna end again with this call for commitment to civic engagement and civic life in America, because none of us asked for this moment. Right? I look back on history and some of America's hardest times. You look at moments where people stood up to do great things, right? The suffragettes, the greatest generation, the freedom riders, folks like John Lewis, my colleague, our colleague, that Michael Bennet spoke so much about. They didn't ask for that moment, but that is always the case with leadership. You never get to choose the moment is thrust upon you. So our only decision is whether we're going to answer that call and what we're willing to do to serve and to step up and put it all on the line to protect this democracy, to protect our families, to protect our community, and to get through this together. I promise you, you have all of me. From day one, you have had all of me in this project. And I know you do. I see Michael Bennet running around relentlessly around the state doing the same, and I know you have all of him too. But we cannot do this alone. No one person can do it alone. This is a community project, and I implore you to join with us and to do more. And I know it's uncomfortable, and I know you are all so busy, but we all have to do more to get through it, and I know that we can. I am hopeful that there will be a new era. I'm hopeful that we will get through this, and we will rebuild something new, something different that actually can fulfill the promise that is yet unfulfilled in America.
Congressman Crow. I will. Before you, he deserves it, and I appreciate it. I can't resist because the guy's such an amazing historian. Thank you for being out here, by the way. Some of you asked, what can we do? What can we do? Part of it is showing up to stuff like this. Part of it is raising your voices. Part of it is making connections, meeting people, knowing that we're all in this together, which we are. And sometimes when young kids come to see me, like middle school students in particular in D.C., and they've got a tour of the Supreme Court or the Washington Monument, all that stuff, before they come to see me in the Capitol. And sometimes they have some of their parents with them, and I'm trying on the parents as well, even though I'm pretending it's just about talking to the kids as a former superintendent. But one of the things I say to them is, the building that I work in was built by enslaved human beings, the U.S. Capitol. And that if you want to think about this country, you need to understand that we have been in a crucible that Jason talks about so eloquently from the very beginning. You know, a fight, a struggle between the highest ideals that humans have ever committed. I don't care how cynical you are, ever committed to the page. The words on the Constitution, the words in the Declaration of Independence, and literally the worst impulses in human history. In our case, human slavery. In our case, the genocide of Native Americans. And that crucible has been with us from the beginning and is going to be with us for a long, long time to come. When I was last running for office, I would tell the story about Camp Hale, you know, a camp that was created up in the mountains to train people from all over the country, some the greatest mountaineers and greatest skiers, some who had never seen snow before. I'm shortcutting it because I know you got to go, but to train people to fight the Nazis, you know, and they went over after 3 years and they pushed the Nazis out of northern Italy. One of the great stories of America, one of the great stories of Colorado. And I tell that story because we were trying to get Joe Biden to make that a national monument, and actually he made it. The first national monument of his administration was Camp Hale, right here in Colorado, which is good. But as I was traveling and thinking, and I began to tell a story about another camp that was built exactly at the same time as Camp Amache, or Camp Hale, and that was Camp Amache. Same war, same fight against tyranny, same patriotic battle, but in that camp, unlike Camp Hale, there were 10,000 American citizens locked up behind barbed wire. Roosevelt using the same the same law that Trump is using right now on immigration. And the people behind that barbed wire on the eastern plains of Colorado, some of them, even though they were locked up there, sent their kids to fight fascism in Europe while they were locked up there. And some of them said, forget it. As long as we're locked up here, we're not sending our kids over there. I don't know about you, but I think of those things as both patriotic decisions. And if you know anything about our history, you can't give up and you can't despair. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. And there are kids in your community, there are kids all over this state that need better from us. We can't make Trump 10 feet tall. You know? And that doesn't mean we shouldn't fight. It doesn't mean we shouldn't resist. Of course we should. But our job is to build a better future for our children and for our grandchildren. And people who say, well, you're being naive, don't you know how? Again, the only thing that's naive is to give up hope. That's the only thing that's naive. That is what's naive. Because we will never, ever, ever overcome this without that. And I'll just finish by saying again, I agree totally with Jason. In addition to watching that too much cable and too much, volunteer, find something you can do to help somebody in the community who needs your help. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, let her speak.
It's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. You
Yeah,
want to go?
sure.
And then we'll.
Yes, ma'am. Well, first and foremost, if you're having problems with your family, if you have family members, it sounds like maybe your husband or somebody has been. Yep, okay. First and foremost, one of our biggest responsibilities, and Michael Bennett's team does this too, is constituent casework. We have entire teams available in our offices that do hundreds of these cases to help with immigration, with USCIS, with ICE. So we're going to get you contact information from my team right now, so you can be in touch with my staff, And if there is a specific issue you have that we can intercede on your behalf, we will do that, and we will fight for you. And I personally will fight for you. One of the things I'm most proud of is the fact that I represent one of the most diverse communities in the country, right? I have nearly 1 out of 5, nearly 20% of the people I represent were born outside of the United States. There's over 130 languages spoken in our public schools, and that's a source of great strength and pride for us. And we are truly a community that represents the world. And I will fight for that, and I will fight for your family. And it's fine. Yes. Yes, I know, and it is awful. It is horrible, and there's so many people in our community that are experiencing the same thing. And you all deserve comprehensive reform. You deserve a pathway to citizenship. You deserve protection for dreamers and DACA. All of those things are necessary. But until we are in the position to fight for and deliver that for you, we will defend you and your family and your daughter. And you have our contact. Okay.
I would just like to mention, and then we're out of here. I'm sorry, but thank you, because there are people not just all over this district, but all over this state that have exactly the same concern that you have. And Jason's right. I mean, our offices are spending a lot of time working on individual cases to make sure that people are protected, and we will continue to do that and make sure that our office knows, and Jason's, and we work together, we collaborate together on these. So I'm really just grateful that you were raising your voice, because you weren't just raising it for your daughter, you were raising it for people and for people with daughters all over the state of Colorado, and thank you for that. I heard Jason mention Cindy McCain. I know her, but not as well as John McCain, who has passed away. But man, do I miss him now, because in 2013, he and I were 2 of the 8 members of the Gang of 8 who wrote the last comprehensive immigration bill that passed the Senate, 68 votes, that did all the things that Jason just said, secured our border, pathway to citizenship for 11 million people, the most progressive DREAM Act that had ever been written, and all the visa issues that we need to work on together. And the point you made, I just think, is such an important one, because you mentioned people that have been here for 30 years in the state of Colorado, that have been supporting our economy, that have been supporting our community. And it is an important reminder of the work that has to get done, I'm sorry we didn't pass it before, because I don't think we would have ever seen Donald Trump elected president if we had passed that bill. I really believe that. And we will continue to fight for you every step of the way. Thank you very much for raising that. All right. I got to get out of here. Yeah.